24 bits versus 16 bits. Do audiophiles hear less noise or more detail? Let's start with a trio of axioms. Better is better. Just good enough is not good enough. What satisfies and pleases only 99% of the people is not good enough. So my trio of axioms, my triumvirate, my triarchy. I have a dictionary and a thesaurus. Anyway, it's comment time already. Do you disagree with my axioms? Comment now. You probably won't need to watch the rest of my video. But you're still here. And you agree with me that 24-bit digital audio is better than 16. Yes, I know, sampling rate, but that will be a topic for a different video. But how is 24-bit audio better? Well, it's better for recording and production because you don't have to get things exactly right. It's nice if things are exactly right, but if you're recording and you don't leave yourself some headroom, you're going to clip sooner or later. So use, or rather don't use, a couple of those bits and you are worry-free. You can concentrate on more important things like microphone positioning. But here, I'm going to consider the listener, the audiophile, in his or her sound-insulated and acoustically treated listening room, seated on their audiophile quality listening chair. Oh yes, audiophile listening chairs exist. I'd suggest perhaps a replica Eels Lounger for less than £1,000 GBP, or a Svargo ZGR Plus Zero Gravity Recliner for less than £2,000, or a Braddington Young Leather Recliner. For their top-spec models, you'd have to phone for the price, so I suggest you probably can't afford one. Yes, the listener, listening to 24 bits or 16. What do they get for those 8 extra bits? Assuming that the recording they are listening to uses all of those bits in the best possible way. The short answer is less noise or more detail. I say or because from my researches, some listeners consider the noise, other listeners consider the detail. And of course, some may consider both, but I'm going to consider either or, noise or detail. If you research lightly into digital audio, you'll soon find mention that each bit gives you 6 decibels of dynamic range. 6.02 if you want to be picky. Now, I said dynamic range. Yes, dither, very low-level noise added to the signal, can extend dynamic range, but I'll put a pin in this for the moment. So, if you could have a perfect 16-bit recording and perfect 16-bit reproduction, you will achieve 96 decibels of dynamic range, between the very lowest level that can be reproduced above silence and the very highest level above which would be clipping and distortion. In a 24-bit recording, again if we consider perfection, then we can achieve 144 decibels of dynamic range, 48 decibels better than 16-bit. Going back to my axioms, this clearly fulfills axioms 1 and 2. 24-bit is better, and if 16-bit is just good enough, then it's not good enough. But how do we hear this? Perceive it? Well, suppose that a recording was made out in the desert someplace, of, let's say, an acoustic band of some kind, doesn't matter what. And the producer has this marvellous idea that the album should start from silence. Then all the musicians walk in, pick up their instruments and start playing. And the album will obviously be bookended the same way. So we start and end with deep, dark, stark, stony silence. Then the merest sound of the first soft-shoed musician approaching the studio door. In 16 bits, I have to come back to dither. The point of dither is that without it, at very low levels, the least significant bit flicks on and off, 0 to 1 and back. Clearly, this is going to be a pulse waveform, unpleasant to the ear and correlated to the signal. It is distortion, and we don't want it. So, correctly, 16-bit digital audio needs dither. And during the silences, you will hear dither, noise. Now, the question is, can you actually hear it? I've done a few informal tests late at night on headphones, so if there's anything to hear, I will hear it. If I set my listening level so that the loud parts of whatever I'm playing are as loud as I can possibly ever want, I can't hear the dither. I have to turn up the level after pressing the stop button to hear the dither, and then I can hear it. I'm doing this in my digital audio workstation software so I can turn down the audio and leave just the dither. Of course, this is just me. I'm not an audiophile, I'm an enthusiast. A true audiophile may have better hearing than me, and possibly more acute perception. And naturally, a very expensive and highly resolving system. So if I can't hear it, an audiophile might. With 24 bits, it's generally acknowledged that dither isn't needed. The lowest levels are just so far down, and there will be enough natural acoustic and electronic noise to make any recording effectively self-dithering. I will invite comments, however, and if any expert can tell us why a 24-bit recording might need dither, let us know. So if I informally test myself with 24-bit audio without dither, there's just no noise, only the noise of electronics and electrons. And according to my axioms, if there is the slightest possibility of hearing dither noise in a 16-bit system, then that's only just good enough. And just good enough is not good enough. And better is better. And if 99% of people don't care, 99.9% in fact, the remaining 0.1% audiophiles need 24 bits rather than 16. So you can't hear the noise even if audiophiles can. The difference between 16-bit and 24-bit doesn't matter then. Well, what about detail? This is an entirely different issue to noise. It's slightly different to noise, or maybe it's the same issue, just presenting itself differently. Okay, here we go. Do you remember back in ancient times you used to listen to cassettes? Come on, you did. We're all friends here, you can admit it. I'm assuming that since, as well as being friends, we're all audio enthusiasts. So you didn't buy pre-recorded cassettes, music cassettes as they used to be known. You borrowed your friends' records and copied them. Shh, no one's going to know and I won't tell. Since you're an enthusiast, the noise from cassette would bother you. Maybe you used Dolby. Maybe you never cleaned your heads and didn't. But the additional noise of the cassette format, on top of the really rather reasonable noise of vinyl, was an irritation. But you only heard the noise before the music started, and in quiet sections, and after the end. While the music was playing anything louder than mezzo forte, or mezzo piano with Dolby, you heard no noise at all. Well, this is the wonderful masking effect. High-level signals block out the noise. High-level signals block out low-level signals in general. Okay, frequency comes into it, but on cassettes, once the music started, you were pretty much okay. Now, let's get back to digital. As discussed, there is dither noise in properly mastered 16-bit, but you can't hear it because the level of the noise is so low. But as the music starts to play, the noise piggybacks onto the signal and brings it into the audible range of levels. So what this noise is doing is messing with the very fine details of the signal. You're trying to hear the music, all of the music, but you're hearing mostly music and some of the noise. Masking effect to the rescue. You can't hear the noise because it's masked by the music. But it's there, and you know it's there. Isn't it something you ought to worry about? I'm going to put it like this. If you don't hear the small amount of noise that there is as actual noise, maybe you perceive it as messing up the very fine details of the signal. This is exactly what's happening. 16 bits are insufficiently resolving, and fine details of the signal are turned into noise. It isn't that there's some signal and some noise. The noise is part of the signal, and it's messing with you. If I had an audiophile hat, I'd be wearing it now. But if we were talking about 12 bits rather than 16, then this wouldn't be just, in theory, you'd hear the lack of detail and the noise. And so back to my axioms. 16 bits are just good enough, and just good enough is not good enough. Let me turn to 24 bits in the same manner of thinking. You could consider that any tiny amount of noise that there is messing less with the fine details of the music. Where at one point the instantaneous level rose by a tiny fraction of a dB, your 16-bit CD copy messed with this, and, by chance, because noise is random, the level went down. But because your 24-bit lossless download is more highly resolving, that tiny change in level was captured perfectly. Well, nothing's perfect, but with very much higher accuracy. I'm going back to my hypothetical audiophile, with a highly resolving system in their sound-insulated and acoustically treated listening room, lounging in their replica Eames lounger. They can't hear any noise in 24-bit audio, and neither can they in 16. But the whole point of hi-fi and audiophilia is to retrieve, hear, perceive and appreciate as much detail as possible. In 16 bits there's less, in 24 bits there is more. Better is better. Just good enough is not good enough. What satisfies and pleases only 99% of the people, or 99.9%, is definitely not good enough. See you soon.
Hi, I'm Phil, audiophile. I purchase both the CD and 24-bit download of anything I want to listen to. I subtract the 16-bit audio from the 24-bit, thus retrieving the 8 bits that I wouldn't otherwise hear clearly. I then amplify them and pump them through my underfloor subwoofer to give me lounger recliner quality detail in the full 360 degrees.